So welcome back to another mini set card review for Into the Emerald Dream. As of right now, all of the cards have been revealed. You can go look them up, but I'm going to save some for a final video tomorrow just to spread these out a little bit. But today we're going to take a look at some new neutral legendaries, Shaman cards, Demon Hunter cards, and Paladin cards. And kicking it off here with a pretty crazy one, Fyrakk the Blazing. This is a 9 mana 7/7 dragon. It is neutral. It is immune to fire spells, which is certainly going to be important for this battle cry. Cast 20 mana worth of fire spells at random enemies. So any like, board based AoEs that deal damage, like Hellfire or something, not going to kill off your Fyrakk. Now he can die. Even in the reveal video for this one, they killed him off with like I think it was Eat the Imp, because immune does not stop destroy effects. So if there's no random enemies that can be targeted by like an Eat the Imp, for instance, it can still hit him. So it's not like he's totally immune from death, but safer than normal perhaps. But ultimately you're just getting a big old pile of crazy fire spells, many of them pointed at enemies, many of them clearing a board, some of them dealing face damage. We can actually look at the fire spell pool here real quick just to catch you up on all the different fire spells. So there are some big ones. We were going to talk about this one later in the video. For instance, Searing Reflection, get you a big old 8/8 potentially. There's stuff like Flame Strike to clear the board. There's quite a bit of things that do like direct face damage like Fireball, or incidental face damage like Solar Flares. It's just ripping two Shadow Flame Suffusion's a card we're going to look at tomorrow, I think. But here's a new way to deal 3 damage. There's some board buffs, but a lot of little damage like Hot Coals, Hellfire, a lot of little AoEs that kind of deal 2 to face. Here's another new Priest card we're not going to talk about today, but this one deals 1 damage to all enemy minions. So I think, generally this is going to lean towards board clears, like a lot of little chip damage to the enemy's board. And it's actually going to generate a fair bit of value as well. There are a handful of different things that are like discovering cards, drawing some cards. So I think when you play Fyrakk, you're going to reliably hope a couple things happen, that you just end up with a few extra things in hand, and you probably resolve most of the opponent's board most of the time. Now, obviously this is one of those kind of Yogg style effects where nothing is reliable. Things can go hilariously wrong. You can have a lot of problems. It can backfire, if you will. But I think this actually will be a tool kind of in that Yogg space for classes that maybe don't have access to a lot of AoE, say like Druid, for instance, where this becomes a nice payoff that's just a board clear kind of most of the time that has that occasional upside. Now, I also think there's a really spicy home for this in Shaman with Shutter Block. I already confirmed with Blizzard ahead of time. They tested it for me. This can deal face damage with Shutter Block. Shutter Block has that limitation that the card can't deal face, but it's not the card dealing the damage, it's the spells he's casting dealing the damage. So apparently it still works with Shutter Block. So you can basically play Shutter Block and then this, even the Shutter Block mini, like all at once on turn 10, or set it up a turn early, and deal 60 mana worth of fire spells cast at enemies, which is absurdly chaotic. But that actually might have some reliable lethality, because you might eventually just get to the point where you're clearing a board and enough fireballs and stuff are sneaking through with the only remaining enemy, which is the opponent's face, that this could actually be a bit of a finisher in like a Shutter Block package, which is probably going to be the deck I play first when the mini set comes out, because that sounds really crazy and chaotic and fun. So I don't know, I would actually keep an eye out for this in that home as well. Any battle cry shenanigans just make this even scarier. So I think actually kind of a cool Yogg style card for some decks that need that just like big home run removal finisher kind of thing. Druid has historically been a good spot for that, but that's probably not going to be the only one. And then also maybe some like Shutter Block stuff too gives this card 2 pretty spicy ways to see play. I actually think this one looks surprisingly great for one of those sort of chaos kind of cards. So moving on to our next card, it's Tendril Sage Swift. This is another neutral legendary. By the way, the art in this mini set, man, there has been a few home runs. This card is insane. Tendril looks insane. Paladin card, let me just go to it. This Paladin card this Shaman card looks insane. This Demoner card actually has great art. This Paladin card's insane, and then this Paladin card is really insane. That art is so sick, dude. We've had some home runs. I mean, this stuff, there's still some goofy pieces, whatever. That one's not so bad. But man, there is some amazing art in the set. Anyway, Tendril Sage Swift is a 4-mana 4/3. Death Rattle, deal 1 damage to all enemies, but then if it's killed on your opponent's turn, you deal 4 damage instead. So that all enemies is actually pretty nuts when you look at 4 damage. That's often going to wipe out a lot of stuff on board, and it's a significant amount of face damage as well. So you're creating this really high friction moment, right? We've had some of these cards way back in the past. I think it was like the Frozen Throne expansion had these kind of if it dies on your opponent's turn things. This is a pretty great distinction between the two. That extra 3 damage is really notable. So, this is one of those friction cards where they don't want to kill it, and it might just kind of linger around and sort of get to hit for 4 to face here and there. You could almost see this as like an aggressive tool plays this on 4, and it just creates this real problem for the opponent if they're a board-based deck where they're like, man, I need to deal with this 4 damage on board, but I can't kill it because if I do, I'm going to lose my own board, or that's just so much damage anyway. Like, you create these moments that are pretty tough. There will, of course, be other decks that just don't care. Like, they're like, okay, whatever, I don't have a board. It's just 4 damage. Obviously, this thing's going to hit me for 4 next turn anyway, so just clear it up, and it's no problem. And it was just a 4/3. So that's the real dilemma between this card, is like some matchups where it might feel really annoying and awkward and troublesome, and then other matchups where it basically just does nothing, and you played a really bad slow 4-drop basically with weak stats and stuff that feels pretty bad. And then occasionally, right, the 1 damage here is still relevant. There might be moments where it just feels good to trade this into a 5/5 or something, get a little chip damage on other stuff, some board shapes where that makes sense, but probably not too often. You're really looking for this to die on the opponent's turn. So I just have questions about it from like a deck fit standpoint in that case. Like, does an aggro deck really make room for this? I think it's too unreliable. There are some cool synergies with the Death Rattle, of course, stuff like Death Rattle Demon Hunter. We've seen, we know how crazy that can be. We had Starship version, now we have Ball Hog versions. This does slot into that. The 5-drop resummons Tendril Sage Swift, so there could be some weirdness there where you play the 5-drop, it dies off, 2 of these pop out, and suddenly it's like, crap, dude. If I deal with these, I'm gonna take 8, and if I don't deal with them, I'm gonna take 8. I don't know if that's better than Ball Hog, because Ball Hog, just has like lifesteal. It still does a ton of damage. It's possible though this could replace that. There's also only 1 of these in a deck, so that's another challenge of like consistency, I guess, for that build. But it does at least have some hooks there with the Death Rattle that give it a little bit more promise. So I ultimately think this card's like kind of weird and kind of clunky, but I'm like keeping an eye on it. It's one of those where it's like maybe something comes along that explores this in a way that just really turns that 4 damage into something super scary. All right, moving on to our other neutral cards, we have Zakali Flamemancer, a 6-mana 4/4. Battlecry: if every card in your hand is of a different cost, reduce their costs by 2, which pretty cool effect. Like, I like, that's a fun condition to check on, but seems like impossibly difficult to achieve from a deck building standpoint. Like, you could try to, play out a hand on turn 5 or whatever that leaves you in a spot to do this. And like technically, yeah, like a 2-cost discount is big. There could be, some like OTKs you set up that are otherwise impossible or something. So it's like, this can do things, but ultimately that just feels so hard, so inconsistent. 6 mana is a lot to pay unless it has an immediate payoff, which it can't have that immediate of a payoff because, like, obviously your hand's not all like 2 or less cost cards. So you're gonna have 3s going to 1 and 4s going to 2 and so on, right? If you want to discount a significant number of cards anyway, obviously you just have a couple small things in hand. So ultimately, I just like super clunky here, really hard to work towards. Fun, really neat design, but I just don't think any good at all. All right, so moving on to the Petal Picker here, 3 mana 2/3 Draenei. Battlecry: if you've imbued your hero power twice, draw 2 cards, which, draw 2 on a body for 3 is actually very nice. It just comes down to whether or not imbue decks want to run this and if they need it. Also kind of comes down to timing a little bit. Like, playing this on 3 is when it's certainly going to feel best. Not that it's bad later necessarily, just best on 3. And most decks just won't have this done. So it could be one of those that's sitting in hand a little bit as they wait to find the imbues on time. And I think Druid will very reliably have it done, frankly, by turn 3. It's very easy for Druid to imbue multiple times with cheap spells. So this could actually go in Druid, slot in a Druid, and just give them some nice card draw. I think it could be worth it, although that deck does already have a lot of card draw. Some of it's sort of like delayed and stuff, but definitely a possibility. I think it's also a possibility for Shaman, just because I remember when playing Shaman and trying to put together decks, they just had like no card draw at all. Like they just needed any card draw. So this could be a way to reliably give Imbue Evolved Shaman a way to find more stuff. Plus, of course, the body here is very valuable for an Imbue Evolved Shaman deck because you're just going to bump this up to 5-drop, 6-drop, 8-drop, whatever, as you evolve at 5-drop if you've imbued exactly twice. It's still pretty nice, right? In the scheme of things, that would be a pretty cool 5-mana turn. So I think actually pretty solid card for a couple classes. This is one though that will immediately fall off as Imbue falls out of the meta, maybe in the next expansion, right? Like we don't know if Imbue is gonna make it or not. All of those decks may go away. They're frankly not even that good now. So the ceiling on this is not very high, and the window for this is going to close quickly. But I still think it's a solid option for those two classes in particular. Final neutral card here is Living Flame, a 2-mana 2/2 elemental with Death Rattle. Draw a fire spell, which we've already seen fire elemental mage stuff fusing together. This is another way to add some fuel to that fire. I wore an orange shirt today, by the way. Fire. So yeah, like maybe I don't even know if that's really a deck. I honestly think this card's solid though, right? Just like a 2-mana thing, draw a specific thing is very nice. Tutoring out a fire spell. Some decks might have some big awesome fire spell they really care to find reliably. This gives you that option. May not show up right away, but this is a nice little utility card. Moving over to Shaman, here we have the Avatar of Destruction, a 9-mana 9/9 elemental taunt. Actually pretty cool artwork yet again. Death Rattle deal 9 damage to all enemy minions. So board clear here on this Death Rattle. I mean, this definitely feels like an arena card to me, not really a standard card. When you have these big high cost minions, they often need like just absurdly excessive stat lines. Sometimes they need lifesteal, lethality. This doesn't really have that. This kind of delayed board clear feels risky and susceptible, and I just don't think this will be worth it. Even if you're playing a big card Shaman deck, I don't think this is the right big card for you in most instances. Moving on to Flames of the Fire Lord, a 2-mana fire spell. Deal 4 damage to a random enemy minion, and if you're holding a card that costs 8 or more, deal 8 instead, which I just don't really see this, man. Like 4 damage to a random enemy minion is so unreliable. There definitely are instances where your opponent plays, you know, I'm thinking about like Death Knight playing the 1/4 Reborn lady. I don't know her name, but she gives your Death Rattles Reborn, and this lines up like perfectly, and you're like, yes, they tried to cheat that out early, and I'm a Shaman playing Flames of the Fire Lord. I'm the happiest person on earth right now because I killed that, but that is so rare and happens so rarely. Most of the time there's like, oh, there's 2 1/1s on board and I have Flames of the Fire Lord, and I'm like really sad, and this didn't really do stuff that I needed it to. And like dealing 8, you know, again, occasionally has some upside, but I don't know, man. The randomness here makes me really nervous for this one. Like obviously there are ways to boil down boards and like use other removal and like use an AoE that cleans up small stuff and leaves a big thing behind. Like you can do that to make this better, but I still think it's gonna feel kind of weird and random too often, and gonna have some low rolls, and ultimately that's gonna leave it left out of Shaman decks. All right, so moving on to the final Shaman card here. This one's pretty cool, I think. Embers scarred Welp, 3-mana 3/2 dragon. Battlecry, discover a 5-cost card and then gain 1 mana crystal next turn only. So this is basically saying, hey, you're gonna have 5 mana on turn 4. Find a cool 5-cost thing to do via this discover, and you know, with discover, I think you'll usually find something that feels pretty good to play on turn 4. You know, you're cheating it out a turn early, so it's like, okay, yeah, that's probably going to be reasonable result most of the time, but that's not really the reason to run this, because you're also, remember, kind of giving up your turn 3. You're not really doing much, just playing a 3/2, so that's not going to feel worth it. But if you do have specific stuff that you're trying to cheat out on turn 5 instead, so don't worry about the battle cry, just like save that for later. I'm running, you know, fixed things in my deck that I really want to play on turn 5. Then this becomes a little bit more interesting, right? And I was looking through 5-cost things that might be exciting to do, and I found this Lunar Trailblazer. This could set the cost of a Nebula to 5. Like if you're just only running Nebula, right? Set the cost of Nebula to 5. You're playing this on 4, and then you're playing Nebula on turn 5. Like, that's kind of cool. There's stuff like Farseer Nobundo is a 5-cost card in Shaman. Like, you know, feels kind of bad to play on turn 5. May still not honestly feel great to play on turn 4, but feels a little better at least, right? So if there are these really specific payoffs in your deck already, like this is a cool way to reliably hit those game plans a turn early. I'm still not sure it's worth giving up a turn 3 necessarily. So I don't think this card's like insane or anything, but I do kind of see a world for this where you're just cheating out specific lines. That becomes fairly interesting. All right, so moving on over to Demon Hunter here, we have the Scorch Reaver, a 4-mana 4/4. Battlecry, discover a Fel spell, and then reduce the cost of Fel spells in your hand by 1. So setting up a little bit of a Fel spell kind of world here. And we have, these are the Fel spells for Demon Hunter right now in standard format. There's one we haven't seen yet in this video, the Sigil of Cinder here. But pretty solid cards on average, like nothing, you know, crazy, but we've seen these cards, of course, get played. And I think Sigil of Cinder actually is also another pretty solid card. Stuff like Demonic Deal and Workshop Mishap are probably the odd men out here, but you know, there's still some reliable damage, healing, card draw, like a little bit of everything basically in the pool. The question is, right, like, is it enough to run a Fel spell package yet? I don't think so, right? I don't think so. And I do think that's what Scorch Reaver is going to need. Like, I think you want to fully commit and make sure your hand is full of 4 or 5 Fel spells or something to make this feel kind of free, you know, in essence. I-Beam also sometimes has some weird interactions because even if it gets discounted, I think it goes back to 1 if it's outcasted. So anyway, that might reduce the pool a little bit for exciting things to hit. So this is one where right now, do I think this gets played? No, I don't think it's worth it. But I do think this card is costed out in a way where eventually, if more Fel spells hit, if we get an expansion with 2 or 3 cool Fel spells, maybe 1 or 2 other synergy cards for Fel spells, definitely look at this one again, because I actually think this is a pretty reasonable cost, body, and effect here. The fact that you're discovering one, also make sure, you know, you're getting additional upside, and the act of discovering itself is also just kind of worth something in its own right. So all in all, I like a lot about what this card does. I don't think you're going to see it anytime soon, but I think this is still at its core a really strong card. All right, so moving on to that Sigil of Cinder we saw, 2-mana Fel spell. At the start of your next turn, deal 6 damage, randomly split among all enemies. So another Sigil for Demon Hunter. We've seen a handful of these get played in the past, and I think I kind of like this one as well. You know, 6 damage split among all enemies. That means it can go face. I like the, you know, 1 damage per hit increments here. That tends to line up pretty nicely for a lot of things, you know, so various boards of 1/1s get cleaned up. You know, even if there's 1 medium-sized minion on board, this still has a good chance to chip down that medium-sized minion. And basically the you know, pinginess of this I like a lot better than, for instance, like the Hunter card we saw yesterday, which a lot of you liked more than me, but I guess just to compare these and like double down a little bit on this assessment, right? Like Bursting Shot, it's always hitting 3 random enemies. The damage doesn't condense down to a single target. So that means like your cap per enemy is 2 damage. So like on an empty board, you know, it's only 2 damage to face. On a board with like 4/4s, it never clears a 4/4. It only ever deals 2 damage to a 4/4, right? So it's just kind of got this like cap on its output, and that can sometimes create awkwardness. Whereas a card like Sigil of Cinder, even though it's the same cost, the same amount of damage, and this one is actually delayed, which is clunky, I think it's just so much cleaner in many instances because of the way that it deals its damage. And it can clear up a 4/4. It can deal 6 to face. And although it lacks like consistency or predictability in some cases, because that card you can kind of control or manipulate a little bit more, it's just the way that the damage increments is more favorable in many instances. So I think ultimately, like the same argument you guys are making for that card, which is like, yeah, it's just 6 damage for 2 mana. I like that. I'm going to take that argument and apply it to this card because it really is kind of 6 damage for 2 mana. And it's not always going to work out perfectly, but it just feels efficient. And I think creates like some awkwardness for the opponent sometimes too, playing into it. It's like, oh God, I can't play my board of 1/1s. I got to shift into this thing, but it's still clunky. I'm going to take some damage. How much is going to hit face? There's just all these little questions. And then you get to make decisions based on the results. The opponent is making decisions based on like unpredictability. They don't really know. So I think ultimately that kind of favors you, even though it's delayed and a turn later. So anyway, I actually think this card looks pretty good. All right, so the Fellfire Blaze is another Fell synergy card here. This one's kind of weird, but kind of interesting. It's a 2-mana 2/3 elemental. After you cast a Fell spell, destroy this and deal 2 damage to all enemies. So basically, it's just kind of like a spell sometimes. Like, I think there will be instances where, you know, you're playing this out and immediately destroying it and just using it as an AoE, an immolation aura that thankfully doesn't hit your own stuff, right? Like, and you get a little chip damage. Maybe you get lethal out of it, right? It's a hunter hero power sometimes. It's a little board clear sometimes. Now, you know, it doesn't interact with spell stuff, obviously, like spell damage, so it has some downsides. But then the fact that it's a minion also actually has some upsides, because sometimes you might just play this on turn 2 and like happily just have a 2/3 down, and you sort of bank the Fell spell destruction of it for later, and maybe you get to run it into face for an extra 2 damage before you destroy it if the opponent doesn't immediately deal with this. But, you know, that comes at the risk of maybe they clear it naturally and you never get to use the AoE. So there are all these weird little considerations for this card and like how to use it and stuff. I think ultimately, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Like, you know, if you just look at this as a spell, it's probably an okay spell, you know, but it's not like a crazy output card either. And if you look at it as a minion, I think it's a pretty bad minion. So I'm left in a underwhelmed state perhaps by Fellfire Blaze, but I like this design space a lot. And again, if the right Fell cards come along, this could still make the cut. I don't think it's going to be as strong as the first Demon Hunter card we looked at necessarily, but it might just make enough sense to get there. So this is a weird little card, but kind of a cool, weird little card. All right, so moving on to Paladin, this is Smoldering Strength, another one of these Smoldering spells. Fire, give a friendly minion +1/+1 and upgrades each turn, but discards after 3. That means it's a 1/1 buff for now, but then it'll be a 2/2 buff, then a 3/3 buff, then it will discard itself. In all cases, actually, I think this is solid buff. I mean, 1/1 you're not excited, but 2/2 and 3/3 buffs for 1 feel very efficient, and this is checking those boxes I talked about yesterday with the Smoldering card. Is like, does it have bad conditionality? No, like it's not hard to find something to buff. Particularly the decks that are running this are obviously going to have lots of minions. I mean, you technically have a hero power, like worst case on turn 3. If you had this in hand on turn 1, like you're always going to have a minion to hit reliably in Paladin and the decks that play this, so no conditionality to be worried about, and then it's very cheap at 1 cost, so you're not going to get to a point where it's like stuck in hand. You're going to have 1 mana to spend to play this. Of course, you'll line up turns. So those are both recipes for success for this one. You know, a Paladin loves cheap spells, but do note this is not a holy spell, which is certainly where Paladin is leaning now, but there might still be some synergies there with Lanessa and stuff are possible, but that adds kind of some conditionality and timing to it that might be weird, because you might discard it before you get to that stage of the game. I will say, you know, this is not the most exciting top deck, as most of these probably won't be, right? You don't expect them to be, but it's not unplayable as a top deck. Like a 1/1 buff could still be the difference maker. It's just the fact that, you know, if you're playing this in a more aggressive deck, you often want your cards to be immediately impactful. You really value tempo, and the kind of desire to wait on this a little bit to maximize it might be a little bit inconsistent with that game plan, but ultimately I think it's still pretty efficient. And I think there'll be a lot of moments, you know, you just sit on this for a turn, play it as a 2/2, you're happy. Maybe you'd have it on turn 1 in the mulligan or whatever. You're super happy to get a big buff on turn 3. That feels valuable to me in aggressive decks. So I think Paladin also just, you know, has divine shields and things that care about buffs. So a lot of natural synergies here in the class. This feels pretty good is what I'm getting at. All right, moving on to Searing Reflection with quite possibly the coolest artwork I've seen in Hearthstone in like 8 years. Like this art is so sick and like just like dark and awesome, and like not always aligning with the vibes of Hearthstone these days. We've had so many cute arts and sets. This is like classic dark fantasy cool. This feels like art from OG Hearthstone. Anyway, 7-mana card, fire spell, draw a minion, summon an 8/8 copy of it with divine shield. So we got more like big spell support here. Obviously we've seen lots of Ursol stuff happening in Paladin. We've had like Renewing Flames. We've had Shaladrisil actually being the kind of tree Paladin payoff with Lanessa stuff lately. That's been a very good deck. I don't actually think this ever comes in to supplant Shaladrisil or even Renewing Flames, which isn't even really played anymore anyway, I don't think. At least I don't see it much. So in essence, like, you're not going to need this. Also, that deck doesn't need any extra consistency because they have Ursine Maul, which always draws the two things they care about. So it's like you don't need backup big spells or whatever in that deck. So that's just not a home for this, I don't think. It's just way worse at doing what that deck already does exceptionally well. So is there some other world where Searing Reflection gets played? Like, I do like that you can play this with small minions and it's still good. Like taking small minions with cool effects, you know, I don't know, Lifesteal or Rush or whatever, and then giving them Divine Shield. That's nice. You don't have to run like big payoff minions, which often with these sorts of things in the past, you would want to run like big payoff minions. But you can actually just have small minions that still pay off. There might be something there. It doesn't feel like a really obvious line to me. And ultimately, you know, it is just an 8/8 with Divine Shield. That's not crazy or scary these days, but I don't know. There's something about this card I just don't hate. Maybe it's just because the artwork is so cool. I think it's like okay. It's an okay mid-game card, but then I look at it, it's like 7's not really the mid-game anymore. So probably not actually very good. I think I'm just rooting for it, but I don't think it's very good. And then finally here, the Ash Leaf Pixie, a 2-mana 3/2. Battle Cry, if you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more, gain Divine Shield and Lifesteal. So pretty nice little minion here for a deck that's running big spells, which we've already talked about a few Shaladrisil stuff, Ursol stuff. It's weird that this card and Searing Reflection do not go together at all. Like Searing Reflection and Ashleaf Pixie suck together because it's a Battle Cry, and you don't get a Battle Cry if you're summoning a copy of it with Divine Shield, right? Like that feels, just weird that they don't really go together despite being printed in the exact same mini set. The effects, if they wanted this effect, it doesn't make sense of this. I get it, but it's just a little weird that they're not that cohesive. That said, if your deck's running big spells and it's consistently hitting, this is a great turn 2 card. Like, you don't even care about the Lifesteal, maybe just a 3/2 with Divine Shield, solid little body to get down early for sure. A nice basis for buffs and so on. So kind of an intriguing card. I don't see an immediate need for this anywhere. I don't think it really makes the cut in like Shaladrisil stuff, because right now that's drawing the Shaladrisil often after turn 4 with Ursine Maul. And this is something you want to play on turn 2, so that may not always line up. So that's probably not the right home for it, but I don't know. It's still a solid little card. All right, so all that said, let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Thyrak the Blazing is a 5-star card. Tendril Sage Swift is a 3-star card. Zakali Flamemancer is a 2-star card. Petal Picker is a 3-star card. Living Flame is a 3-star card. Avatar of Destruction is a 2-star card. Flames of the Firelord is a 2-star card. Ember Scarred Welp is a 3-star card. Scorch Reaver is a 4-star card. Sigil of Cinder is a 4-star card. Hellfire Blaze is a 2-star card. Smoldering Strength is a 4-star card. Searing Reflection is a 2-star card. Ashleaf Pixie is a 3-star card. And there you go. That's part 2 of the mini set review. That's a Marvel Snap card that came out today. But we're going to come back tomorrow for the final set of reviews. I know you guys will have already seen all the cards, but I just don't want to make these videos too long. I just think it's better if they're spread out a little bit this way. So stay tuned, I think, for what we got, like Warlock and Warrior and Priest, I think. Oh, and Death Knight. Yeah, the final legendary. That guy's pretty big, but he might be a big disappointment. And I'll leave you with that teaser. So thanks again for watching. Share your thoughts of these cards down below. And until next time, game on.